Good.
We are now live.
Is this a meeting that's supposed to be on YouTube?
It's a meeting of the Brantford Energy Corporation special shareholders meeting.
We are now live on YouTube.
I think that the content of what we're discussing here, quite frankly, is very consistent, if not identical to what we talked about in the media release, and we'll be reviewing that. I think the idea was that we would have both the preface and the follow-up council meeting on YouTube. That's what I was told. Made sense to me.
If I can jump in, yes, that's we're doing this will be public, and as part of the Brantford Energy Corporation, then we'll be flipping into following right after into a special city council meeting after that. So this is all public matters.
Mr. Chair, there are 3 Brantford panelists who are not identified. And Chris, can you ask those individuals to name themselves, please, or identify themselves?
Through the chair, Councillor Utley, this is a meeting of the Brantford Energy Corporation shareholder. I'm here for support for the special city council meeting that's happening right after.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. I think that'd be useful to know who that
Yeah,
is.
to do some sort of an attendance, when I'm looking at the faces that I'm seeing, I'm limited to right now 5. So I see Councillor Utley, Scott Saint, Mayor Davis, Brian Hutchings, myself. Maybe we can go through some sort of an attendance roll call. And
Yeah, what Councillor Utley's getting at is in the participants box.
Yeah.
There's 3 that just show up as Brantford panelists.
So if I can, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, Scott,
Yes.
this I think one is Brian Dambosi. If you can go up to the column up at the top and change your name from Brantford panelist to your name.
that is Brian. I can identify him.
There's 3 dots up there, Brian, and just put your name in there, and then at least one last person with a Brantford panelist, and I don't know who that is. Maybe they want to. Is that Diane Casey?
Yeah, that's myself, Diane Casey.
Okay, I wonder if you could change your name on there, and then Diane Casey will be taking the minutes of this meeting as a Brantford Energy Corporation meeting.
Correct.
And when we switch over to special city council, Chris will take over the minutes from that point in time.
Thank you.
That's correct.
So I'm seeing Councillor Wall, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Sless, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Martin, Mayor Davis, and Councillor Utley.
Yeah.
All righty, and someone's dog.
Yep.
Very good.
Okay, well, I'm going to call the meeting to order, please, and want to welcome everybody to the Brantford Energy Corporation special shareholder meeting. It's now just after 5 o'clock. I appreciate everybody's attendance. First of all, I understand proper notice has been given, so we are able to call this to order. Anybody have any declarations of conflict of interest? Please raise them or raise your hand or speak up. Okay, hearing nothing and seeing nothing, I'll declare there's no conflict of interest identified. We need a motion to approve the agenda that's been circulated ahead of time, and you should have all have a copy. I need a motion. John Utley, Councillor Utley, thank you. So have a seconder. Can't see anybody. Councillor Martin, could you do that? Thank you. All right. Approval of agenda has been received. Is any objections? No. Okay, we'll move on. Approval of previous minutes. Give a motion to approve those. Councillor Utley and Councillor Martin. Thank you. The motion. Anybody disagree or have an objection? No, we'll declare those are passed as well. So move on to the presentations, which is the strategic initiative. But before I do, I just want to make sure everybody is aware that I am Scott Saint, the chair of the Brantford Energy Corporation. And we have with me, obviously tonight, Paul Kwasnick, who's the president and CEO of Brantford Energy Corporation. And now that's been identified with Brian Dambois as the CFO and Diane Casey as the executive assistant to the CEO. So those are the folks in attendance from the Brantford Energy Corporation. Okay, Paul, I guess we'll move into the strategic initiative agenda item, which is on your screen or shown on the screen. We'll move maybe to the next slide, which is the first slide. Okay, don't see who's
Nope.
running the slide deck.
I'm running the slide, Mr. Chair, and so you can start with the presentation.
All right, thank you very much. And thought we'd just start with a reminder of folks, particularly those maybe that are joining in on the YouTube, that the Brantford Energy Corporation is the holding company for the business that the city is a single shareholder. The primary goal of Brantford Energy Corporation is to create the shareholder value through growing and operating energy infrastructure businesses. Brantford Energy Corporation's mission is to deliver competitive returns, shareholder value, and create a competitive advantage for the community. At Brantford Energy Corporation, we are committed to providing the city of Brantford and its residents and businesses with safe, reliable, efficient, and locally operated service through the Brantford Power Incorporated, the electrical distribution utility, which is regulated by the Ontario Energy Board, or OEB, and Brantford Hydro's Telecommunication Energy Services, which is our non-regulated business unit. Which this requires a great deal of teamwork, dedication, and focus on health and safety of our employees and the public, and constant communication with the customers, stakeholders, and you, the shareholder. A key role for the board is to drive strategy for the organization, which is done through consistent adherence to the strategic plan. And we've been focused on organizational development, investments to modernize the facility and infrastructure, and pursuit of excellence, with an aim to raise the visibility of the utility within Brantford and to help customers manage their energy needs. It should be noted that the Board of Directors strategic planning has always included addressing the overall marketplace and the rapidly changing energy sector which we operate in. Next slide, please. So it's this strategic focus that has led Brantford Energy Corporation to be active in changing electric distribution sector to pursue opportunities for collaborations or new relationships that might add value to our LDC business. And to that end, Cambridge and North Dumfries Energy Plus Incorporated and Brantford Energy Corporation, the holding companies for Energy Plus and Brantford Power, electric utilities serving Cambridge, North Dumfries, Brant County, and Brantford, hired consultants to perform a study on the benefits and risk of a potential merger of their electrical utilities. The decision to perform a study was driven by the experience of similar like-minded utilities on the consolidation that resulted in positive outcomes for the shareholder, the customers, and employees, together with the Ontario government's ongoing attention on local distribution companies, ensuring that they find efficiencies, and the electric utilities needing to adapt quickly to the rapidly changing environment. The board of directors of the holding companies, Cambridge and North Dumfries Energy Plus and Brantford Energy Corporation, endorsed a memorandum of understanding to the shareholders of the city of Brantford, city of Cambridge, and the township of North Dumfries to explore the potential advantages of a merger of the holding companies and their affiliate companies, including Energy Plus and Brantford Power. So a merger between two like-minded utilities can bring positive outcomes for the customers, employees, and shareholders, all subject to the due diligence and negotiations of the shareholders with the aid of their respective legal and financial professional advisors. So now at this point, I will turn over to Paul Kwasnick to walk you through the potential outcomes and the process, some of the process steps coming up. Paul?
Thank you, Scott. And yes, as you've alluded to, there are the potential upsides of something that really does, in addition to having the complements for what has gone on inside of Ontario and the provincial agenda for utilities to seek efficiencies, This opportunity does have a natural fit in terms of the adjacencies of the areas that we serve, and some of the collaboration that we already enjoy and benefit from currently. And so that is why this is, it's critical that we take this next step to dig deeper and to focus and to start to, with a little bit more precision, look at these benefits, which right now are characterized as potential and as opposed to actual and promised. It's a little early to be precise, but the idea of a merged company can deliver extra value to the shareholder, which in turn benefits the city of Brantford on the whole. So what that means is it would be expected that NewCo, as you see on the slide, which is the new company, whatever that would be named, would generate incremental dividends that would be funded by efficiencies that would be driven out of bringing the organizations together, rather than seeing dividends being driven out on the through rates and on the shoulders of customers. And this has, that is good enough. But when you look at the fact that a company with a broader breadth and with larger scale would be able to have a more predictable and sustainable and less risky dividend stream than an organization on a standalone basis. This is not to suggest that our current dividend is at risk, but when you look into the future, the idea of having things having a higher level of certainty and not only being predictable, but at the same time being larger, it certainly does make you want to say, well, how does that work? And we should look into that. And that's really what this meeting is about, is to take that step to apply that level of due diligence. And if that's not enough in terms of additional dividend streams and a higher level of stability, the reality that Brantford in a merged company can retain influence in this new utility that would be the benefactor of future growth. So currently Brantford's story, especially this year in terms of expansion, is very, very positive and exciting. And it looks to be that way for into the future. But when you go beyond 5-10 year windows and you look at how this geography of Brant County would grow, and which is currently served by Energy Plus, that we would actually see ourselves, in addition to that, the newly annexed areas of Brantford would also be a part of what could be a growth opportunity for this new utility. So exciting opportunities, but again, needs to be looked at in further detail. And that is what the ask is today, is to move forward with a memorandum of understanding. You'll hear me say MOU periodically. That is the substantive first step to really dig into what these potential benefits could be for the shareholder. But I'm sure that those of you who are watching online and inevitably we have the customer in our lens at all times, have questions about what about me and how does this affect me? And I will say that in the memorandum of understanding that we would be looking at, it does have clearly guiding principles that are embedded within the document that would be shared by all the parties as it goes into this deeper dive of the opportunity. And one of them is galvanized around the customer benefit, which is a key element of the memorandum of understanding and the potential of a new company coming out of this exercise. It's clearly identified in the MOU as an area of focus. And if that's not enough, customers can rest assured that any transaction would be reviewed and be subject to approval of the Ontario Energy Board. And as a part of that process, again, as an extra layer, there is a no harms test that the OEB applies to all mergers of this nature, which really does provide some assurance that no single party from a customer base is going to be subject to some level of unfair rate application. And what that means in plainer language is that a more stable and competitive electricity distribution rate for 10 years after the merger is a fundamental of what we would be looking to accomplish, and validate that in fact would mean that you would be able to say for that period of time, your rates would stay the same, except for some type of inflationary increase, some index to keep up with costs, but the cost that normally would be passed on to customers over that first 10 years would be really realized through the efficiencies of the new company itself. So that really is very much a lot of techno speak, I recognize, and you want to know how much exactly. What I can say is that there's a 10-year window for customers after post-merger, where you have an element of stability with only inflationary increases or an index similar to that for the first 10 years after. And that's a very, very attractive incentive for everybody. For the shareholder, we've talked about the benefits, and for customers to be able to take advantage of that. And if that's not enough, so we've talked about the shareholder, we've talked about rates, and then you would look at service and where would locations be, and where would the utility, and where would we operate out of. And I think we're very proud as Brantford Power about our service record. We're not perfect by no means, but we do ask regularly, and customers tell us often that they're pleased with what we're doing. And when we do trip, we pick ourselves back up and try to correct ourselves. We would be looking for a new company that would have those exact same fundamentals and operating principles, beginning with response and having operation centers in both cities. So we would continue to operate out of Brantford and have a contingent that would service Brantford and the surrounding area out of our location at 150 Savannah Oaks. We would also, in addition to retaining this local presence, have local influence and local ownership. And that's a key element in terms of being able to have that level of connectivity with such a key service provider to the community, that you wouldn't be reducing yourself to being having no say and no seat at any table to say how you wanted your utility to look and feel and operate. So we would continue with our commitment to maintain that high level of customer service. And in addition to that, like we mentioned earlier, the fact is the world's changing. Our customers have changed even in the time that I have been involved with this in this role, and they have been over the last 20, 30 years. The demand for innovation and response to look at the enhancements and the advancements that can be done in terms of energy provision will only continue to, I think, accelerate in this next decade and in this next 20 years. And a larger company that at the same time has an affinity for its local customers, but at the same time has scale to be a part of and anticipate innovation is an exciting thing for our area, and to keep us at the forefront of the technology curve. So those are really high-level summaries of the potential customer and shareholder benefits. And we don't get a chance to dig into what those are until we take this first step, which is this memorandum of understanding. And again, maybe for you who are watching online or need a refresher, what is a memorandum of understanding? Well, let's talk about it at what it's not. The final point on the slide is it does not constitute a final agreement to merge. It really is. It's a positioning. It's an agreement that focuses all parties on validating and weighing the very potential positive outcomes that I just illustrated for you. And that's really this necessary step that all parties are at, both shareholders are at in the next hopefully days and weeks to come. Time is of the essence. This is a very an interesting opportunity that warrants some acceleration, but also some careful thought. So the memorandum is it's a written understanding that people can leave if they get exhausted by it and find that there's no merit in it. However, at the same time, it's an opportunity to make sure that objectives are aligned. It is there's an element of exclusivity that says while this is in operation, we won't look at other things, and that we will focus on this for what is a relatively short period of time, to get other legal professionals involved, to give you, the shareholder, good advice, and to actually hold some rigor around a timetable. So the memorandum of understanding, you'll hear the words of non-binding, in that it is not a merger. It is an agreement to really dig deep and to dedicate some time and effort into evaluating a merger by both shareholders. So if visuals help you as to, so how long does all this take and where do we sit, you will see that we are at the very beginning. The timeline helps me at least keep track, and you'll see we have essentially one check mark, which is that the boards at the far left of this continuum have endorsed the memorandum of understanding. And so we're right at this at the point in time here with this October, November 2020 area, right in here where we are presenting the MOU for endorsement, and then the shareholders actually endorsing. And it is this piece here where exploration emerge doesn't proceed if the shareholders don't endorse the MOU. And so we don't get a chance to move on to these to get additional answers from our independent financial and legal advice. And then you move into shareholder agreements. And then, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we end up before the OEB and apply the no harm test. I'm working my way to the second last bullet on the right-hand side. And then ultimately, it's possible that we could see ourselves with a new merged entity as early as the first quarter of 2022. These are aspirational. They could take longer. We could see acceleration. But what we do know with certainty is that we are at this point in time here where the exploration emerge doesn't go anywhere if we don't move forward with some sort of approval by all parties. And so as I move into the recommendation slide, and the final summary is that it's important, and I know I've reiterated it, that there has been no decision to actually merge. But for us to look closer, it's contingent on the respective councils of all parties involved, North Dumfries, Cambridge, and Brantford, to agree to participate in this MOU. First step in a lengthy process. And so we're looking forward to seeing what the future holds. But at first, we need to consider this recommendation, which is, I hope that you will, having heard that the board fully endorses the MOU and that it recommends that you review it as a shareholder and approve it to explore this opportunity. And so the recommendation, simply put, for today's meeting is that you accept and receive the presentation that Scott and I have just delivered, and that you then move forward around this opportunity and this initiative to take it to City Council for consideration and action as required. And so we would be looking for a mover and a seconder to put that on the table. Councillor Martin and Councillor Utley. Any discussion? Mayor Davis? I can't hear you, Mayor Davis.
So Energy Plus, I just want to make sure I understand. So Energy Plus, it's owned, like we own Brantford Energy, and Energy Plus is owned by the City of Cambridge and the Township of North Dumfries, right?
Correct.
Okay. And they provide hydro service to Cambridge, North Dumfries, and a large part of the county of Brant, right?
Correct.
Right, including what we call the boundary lands here within the city.
So that's probably a more accurate way to put it, the boundary lands. For some reason, I'm calling it the newly annexed areas of Brantford, but the boundary lands for with certainty are serviced by Energy Plus as we're currently configured. And so that's a fact to be true, and will be a point, I would think, in the long term of confusion for customers.
All right, so if the merger does go ahead, and this by no means says it is, we would then be partners with North Dumfries and Cambridge. Is that the idea?
You would be shareholders with those two entities. Yes, you would be.
Okay. All right. And what degree of relationship is there already between Brantford Energy and Energy Plus?
So I can tell you that, again, there is obviously the geography of where Brantford Power Services, which is, exclusively the city of Brantford. And then you have the surrounding areas of Brant County, which include, Burford, Mount Pleasant, Cairnsville, Paris, St. George. Those areas are serviced by Energy Plus. And to that end, not only the fact that there's a geography that is complementary, that causes us to have to work together frequently. That's even gone further. I would say we would be one of the prime examples of collaboration at work. We have a joint investment in our transformer station, which is just on Powerline Road behind me here. We are actually on schedule to have Energy Plus be a long-term tenant at our facility here at 150 Savannah Oaks, regardless of outcome of the merger. And that this location was very suitable for Energy Plus to reach its service areas. We had complementary needs. So those are two big things: to co-own a transmission station and to cohabitate in a facility and share costs. And then in addition to that, there's a multitude of examples where we deal with things operationally and administratively, not to say weekly, but regularly. And so it's a positive deal. In addition to final part, mutual aid. Fortunately, we haven't had too many issues where we've had to call on each other, but there have been circumstances where we are covering each other's backs in terms of responding to unplanned outages.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I see two other participants have raised hands. Councillor Utley? I can't see the order of when you're raising them, so that's my only issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the viewers that are looking in, I have two questions. If you could explain this to them. The first being, if this merger goes through, there'll be a rate stabilization for 10 years. But that doesn't mean that there won't be any increases to the cost of energy that flows through the utility from Ontario Generation.
Yeah.
Could you just explain that for the viewers, please?
So that's very astute observation there, Councillor Utley, in that our percentage of the total bill that a customer would pay now would be somewhere in the order of 17 to 20% at the most. And so you're looking at the bill that Brantford Power actually manages on your behalf and collects for. Only about 17 to 20% of it is attributable to the distribution company, which is Brantford Power. That remaining 80%, just to keep the numbers round, is really an additional charges that is primarily made up of the cost of energy that you just alluded to, Councillor Utley. We don't control that. That is a pass-through for us. There's no markup for us as a distribution company, but it is, and so that is a variable that we will not control. So we need to be precise and cautious about what the promise is, in that the distribution rates that for the poles and transformers and the trucks and the infrastructure that actually is in our neighborhoods right now that we operate, Brantford Power, that business will see rate stabilization and predictability for 10 years. And so you would be subject to some sort of inflationary index that would be applied, but you wouldn't see a rate rebasing increase over that first 10 years at post-merger. Hopefully that clears it up.
Thank you, Paula. I think it's important that people that are looking in don't get the impression, wow, no rate increases for 10 years. I mean, we'd all like that. But the reality is that we're not in complete control. We're only in control of the part that our utility delivers to customers. The second question is, this is a consolidation. The merger is really a consolidation of 2 or 3 utilities. And could you talk a little bit about the trend in Ontario about consolidation in a very brief way, please?
Yes. I can try to be brief. That is not a strong competency, but I will say that it is, frankly, you've seen large scale mergers. You've seen that have happened to the east of us that have taken larger utilities and created utilities that have had like 1 million plus customers that come out of it. And so whether you are a small or mid-size or large, there's a record of those utilities starting to merge and finding good relationships and relationships that make sense as opposed to having them be imposed. And so I think that the fact that that's happened, you see to the west of us, you see Chatham-Kent has had a couple of successful mergers, including the merger with St. Thomas, their utility. You would move even further on the other side of, into the Durham and Oshawa and Whitby Pickering area, not Oshawa, I should say, but that you've seen mergers out in that area as well. So people finding the logic in adjacencies and complementary utilities that are like-minded, we're seeing it often now. And so, but if you looked at the record, I think that even when I was, when this whole thing started in 2000, there might have been almost, somewhere well north of high 300, 400 MEUs at the time. And so now there's approximately 60. And a lot of that has been done through choices that have been made as opposed to imposed, you have to do this. And so this does have an element of controlling your destiny and making sure that your community gets all the benefits of this.
Thank you, Paul.
I tried to be brief. I can't see questions, I'm sorry, with the view I've got here right now. Can anyone?
Paul, I had my hand up, Paul, if I could.
Councillor Weaver?
Thank you.
And then Councillor Martin.
I apologize if Councillor Martin was before me. I didn't see his hand. Okay. Councillor Utley kind of started bringing the questions forward that I was going to bring forward, actually. So my question was, how many cities own their own power company? Like one city own one power company. Do you know what the number is across Ontario?
I don't right now, to be honest with you, just to give you a precise number, Councillor Weaver. I would say that there are very few utilities out there that have a total private interest in control of them. Even when you look at Hydro One having still a significant ownership share by the province itself, right? So, but I think if you look around, and I'm just doing a scan in my head, I think most, if not all, still have some element of municipal ownership. Absolute 100% ownership, this is the transition that we're talking about here, going from being a sole shareholder to a shareholder in a larger company. And I would think that there's many examples and fewer where people have just said, I'm out of it. And so some have divested, but even those who they've divested to have some sort of municipal or provincial link to their ownership structure.
Okay, thank you for that. So really, it seems like this is the direction that a lot of the power companies and municipalities are going then. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we commented on that earlier to say that it's consistent with that direction. This direction isn't a new thing. I think that it is something that that the sector has been going through an evolution for 20 years to look at its various opportunities. And so there is a consistency here. We're not coming up with some new unproven idea. If anything, there's lessons learned from some of those. I think that you could look at to say we're not recreating a wheel in terms of building a new organization like this. Probably not the end of it either. So I think there is opportunity there. Like when you think about where this sits, this new company to be in a position to control some of its own destiny in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Councillor Martin.
Yes, thank you. Paul, you talked about the rate certainty for the customers. Can you touch on what would happen if we don't merge and we're mandated to go for rebasing fairly soon if we don't merge? Can you I know that that's a decision that you make an application to the province for, and they have the final decision, but can you make a guess as to how much our rates would increase if we go through with that rebasing process?
So I can say that every 5 years, every utility generally goes through an opportunity through a process to adjust its revenue line through a rate rebasing. So that's when you go, just for those of you who are listening at home, you go to the Ontario Energy Board with what is essentially a 5-year business plan and also a reconciliation for what you've done in the last 5 years. And it says, here's what it costs to operate the business and for us to be a sustainable corporation. And then the Ontario Energy Board will opine on that, and they will say, we think that you've been prudent, you've made good decisions, and so consequently, we will allow you to charge your customers X as a rate increase. That's the last time, quite frankly, that there is that sort of rate increase inside of a 5-year period for a distribution utility. After that, subsequently, there's some inflationary mechanism that allows you to increase your rates, but you have this one-time every 5-year increase. And so that's coming up for us as a company next year. And so, yes, there's an adjustment that you would see in every utility. We haven't finalized what that dollar amount would be, but there are costs that are associated with keeping a utility modern and for keeping a utility resourced with talent and all the other things that go into it. And also, we're going to be facing a considerable amount of development here in this next. Some of the capital investment that we're going to be looking at in this next 5 years is, quite frankly, not going to be even discretionary. People are coming to town to do business, and so we have got some investments to make. So we're doing that calculation right now, Councillor Martin. But I would say, and we'll be doing a consultation with customers to say, here's the choices that we're making, and here's what that outcome could be. I don't have a firm dollar amount right now, but there is a rate increase that will be coming to Brantford in April, and then after that, April of 2000, and I should say we would file in April 2021. The rate increases would be 2022, and then you would, quite frankly, you would be back to running your business with that same inflationary increase for the remaining 4 years. So what you do is avoid that 1-year increase. So without giving you a precise number, that's the mechanism that's in place, and we'll be talking to customers about that in the months to come when we do some surveying.
And with the purchase of property for your operation and the renovations that are there, it's safe to say that our rates would go up considerably if we go through the rebasing.
So I will say, I do know that the building itself is not necessarily the key driver to any rate increases. I would tell you that a lot of it is grounded in the capital that we need to invest to make our system accessible to new customers that are coming. So we have an aggressive capital project plan coming up in the next 5 years, and we all know that things are growing here. And we also and then there's the capital that's necessary for literally the system service element, which is taking care of our existing system, making sure that transformers and poles and all the rest of the things that we take for granted are kept up to speed. We have a couple of other things on the agenda. So that's what I'm saying by giving you that list, Councillor Martin, is that, I don't think we should look singularly at the facility. There are costs to being in the facility. We did we're doing a prudent job, and we have a long-term tenant in store for us. So, it would be a contributing factor to rate increases, but it wouldn't be the leading one.
Okay. And some communities just straight up sold their utilities to neighboring communities or other interests, such as Brant County did by selling theirs to Cambridge. There are some people that suggest it's time for the city of Brantford to sell our assets. Would you say that the value of our operation would increase after the merger, so that if we did decide to sell at some point in the future, it would be worth more if we go forward with the merger?
So into the speculation game a little bit, I would say that if you listen to people that have been around the space and anybody that has been involved with a merger of this nature, that generally that the value of the organizations that they build and that they're a part of increase in value. So and there's an anecdotal element to that, Councillor Martin, but I think that that's what we've heard. You're certainly not looking at investing in a space that other people don't want to invest in. Like if you're like, I mean, it is a good business space. It does serve a role for the community. You don't have the opportunity to have annual income streams like this off of interest that the municipality owns very often, if ever. So that's what you got to measure out to say, you know, the promise of increasing dividends for a period of time and increasing value, or a one-time cash out. And that is not my decision. That would ultimately be somebody else's. But I think when everybody else wants to get into the space, there's probably needs to be at least thought of. And I think this MOU triggers it to say, if everyone else wants in there, why wouldn't I want to stay and try to be a part of the growth?
Great, thank you very much.
Paul, I think Councillor Carpenter was next.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul. I think it's a good segue. The rate rebasing program that would take place next year, for example, it would take into account the purchase of 150 Savannah Oaks.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, what was the cost of that?
The cost of the building, the purchase of the building was $11.5 million, I believe.
And renovations?
And I think we're tracking right now to be under the amount of, we're still completing our renovations right now, but the budgeted amount that we talked about when we were in front of council, we're tracking to be positive on that.
Now, when we talk about rebasing is based upon this building, and you said future capital need for new customers. Where are these new customers going to be located?
So, I mean, if you look at the plans of that we've got around growth, even in this area up here that's projected in the Northwest industrial area, even if you look at what's the possibilities of our obligation to service new subdivisions that are slated for up in this area of Brantford, and also out on the northeast side of Brantford. I think there's other possible developments that are in the very, very early planning stages that could be in Brantford as well. So all those things are forecasted to be. You got to make sure that you don't want we've always said here that we know that Brantford Power isn't the only reason, will never be a singular reason why anybody comes to Brantford, but we never want it to be the reason why they don't. And what that means is, I'm sorry, Councillor Carpenter, is that we need to make sure that the system can actually deliver what our customers are forecasted to want and need to do business and to live. So that's the infrastructure that we look at our long-term plan, and we go.
So the new customers are residential customers then, because the industrial areas are already finished. Right? So you're talking about new residential areas within the boundaries, the current boundaries of the city, not the boundary lands, of course.
And I think that there's still some possibilities for growth with the high energy demands, even inside of the existing footprint of Brantford.
Oh, okay. And when you talk about the rate base, so the rate base is based upon those things. And you talk about the current infrastructure. What is the shape of our current infrastructure? Have we not been keeping pace all along with our current infrastructure needs? Replacing poles, lines, so forth?
No, we have a robust program to keep our plan going. We have an asset management program that identifies things that require replacement and a timeline for that, and that's really what triggers the distribution system plan, which we would deliver to the OEB.
Yeah, Paul, the OEB allows a rate of return on investment. It used to be 9%. What is it now?
You've stumped me for a precise number here. Brian, can you jump in? I can't remember.
Yes, the rate of return that we had in our last rates was just slightly above 8%. And that gets set every 5 years.
Sure.
And the OEB hasn't announced the next target for next year.
That might very well explain why everybody wants to jump into this market, because where do you get 8% return on your investment anywhere? That's a pretty good rate of return that the Ontario Energy Board allows us to pass through to our customers on rebasing. I would imagine that's where it comes in on the rebasing. When you look at your assets and your purchases and your rate of return, it's part of that rebasing. The rebasing gives you the base, and then you get the inflationary increases tacked onto that. Is that how I understand how that works?
It would be a line item that would be a part of the increases. Absolutely.
Okay, now, when you talked about the 10-year freeze, for example, the 10-year freeze is just having a rebase, right? Which would take into account all these expenses that wouldn't come. In 10 years, there'd be a pretty good catch up on all that cost, but they're not.
So actually, and so I will caution everybody and those at home who are watching, it's not a freeze, right? It's stability. There would be some inflationary increases or some index that would be applied. So we need to be a little bit careful, but I would say that, you know, even coming out of that, coming out of the 10 years, there is again, you know, a 5-year blending period of where you're looking at, you know, things being harmonized. And so it's almost, it's not the same mechanism, Councillor Carpenter, but it's almost, you know, 15 years. It simulates 15 years, 10 years for sure, and then a harmonization period on the other end of that. And
you'll be making up that base rate stabilization over that next 5 years.
So you would see if there wasn't a requirement to, you would ultimately, the new company will have to go to the Ontario Energy Board and apply for rates, right? But I think the fact is that you have this 10-year stabilization, a 5-year of harmonization, and then you'll be at that period of time where you'd have, yeah, just like any other business would go and say, I need to go to a regulator. It's unique. It's not like a regular business that decides price increases in its own boardroom. It has to go to the regulator and say, at a predictable interval every 5 years, here's what I need to run this. And so, yes, ultimately they would have to do that. One point, Councillor Carpenter, is that, you know, the rates right now are, it would be, I think, you know, if there's people listening who are going, oh, I'm going to get stuck with this higher rate. The fact is that the rates are quite uniform. The cost structures are uniformed and the rates are uniform. There wouldn't be, you know, that shock at some time, even 15 years from now.
I would take it that this 10-year not rebasing would apply to Cambridge as well.
Yes.
So at the same time, the ability for their infrastructure to be in very good shape, or they're reviewing their past expenditures, what would roll into their rates. Do we know what that number is? And
I think that there would be some. I think part of, you know, after, you know, hopefully if you agree to look into this and move forward with the MOU, that, you know, some level of due diligence, you've got a legal stream, a financial stream, and then you would ultimately have, you know, not ultimately, there could be more, but a technical stream where the utilities would undertake a review of everybody's assets, and then that would be a part of, you know, what gets triggered when the shareholders start to you know, really sharpen pencils and come up with conclusions to say, I see that there's a difference here, and the conditions of the systems could be one part, but that would be part of the due diligence process at the end.
Okay, well, that answers a lot of questions and certainly makes it clear for the public, because I don't want them to think they got there's a free ride. There's no such thing as a free ride. But anyways, as you said, we can't be expecting that we're going to have rate freezes. We're going to have rate increases regardless. Now, would that still apply if we sold the utility for the 170 million to Cambridge and North Dumfries?
Your 170 million, I don't know whether that's a real number, but I would say that, you know, I don't know whether it would be between you and whoever you sold it to come up with what your expectations are of a future entity.
Would the rate rebasing, can that be part of that program if it was to be sold, for example? I believe the OEB allows for that same kind of freeze, not freeze, but same kind of rate rebasing on newly purchases too, do they not?
Yeah. I've not looked into that in that level of detail. I think that it would make sense, but I'll have to get back to you on that one.
All right, thank you very much.
All righty. If we're good, Mr. Chair, if we see no other
There's
questions.
two more, Paul,
Oh,
there's two more
sorry.
hands up.
For some reason, I
Councilor
can't see
McCreary
hands
and Councilor Sless.
Very good.
Yes, thank you. I'll jump in. Thanks for the presentation. A number of questions. We're now publicly discussing things that we've had delivered to us in camera as shareholders. Are we to consider now that all the information that was provided in camera is now publicly disclosable?
I think that there are things from a, should you sign the MOU that you would want to, have a either a subset of council or whatever, however you want to go about reviewing the actual business plan initially and get your own legal and financial advisors to give you an opinion on that one. I think that obviously we're out with a public announcement on the MOU, but I think that there is some commercial interest in you reviewing the business case. Here, I'm giving you legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I would ask your lawyer. I think that there's a negotiation element that you'll want to have your own advisors give you some direction on.
Sure. So do we have a lawyer on the call today?
We do not have a lawyer that
Okay.
is from. Well, wait a minute. I would say I don't know if I think Heidi or Kim could be on the call, but I don't know whether you're deal lawyer. I'll let Brian speak on that. Brian,
I'm only saying that we've crossed a bit of a line here today, and I think it's important that we have a little bit of clarity in terms of where the line is drawn. That's more a comment than anything else. I want to come back now to what you said earlier, Paul, about a survey of the customer base.
Yes.
Could you elaborate slightly on that? Is it going to be? Are we going to be providing them with the same sort of documents that we received with respect to pros and cons of this?
Yeah. So I'm glad you're asking me that, Councilor McCreary, because this is where it gets even a little bit more confusing in that we would always, at the time of every rebasing, have some customer consultation. Like and we really, quite frankly, depending on how this goes, we may very well go through the rebasing process. And as a part of that, the OEB says, you better talk to your customers and ask them what the choices that you're going to be making on their behalf and whether they're either good with it or they give you a begrudging permission to move ahead or that they don't like what you're doing. That is the consultation that I was speaking about, Councilor McCreary. So it would not be specific to this initiative. It will be a little bit, we're going to have to, provide some clarity when we make those outreaches and when people will go online and fill out a workbook and talk about what they, so it's not about this, it's not about the merger specifically, it's about our business standalone.
So if there is to be a public consultation, that'll be something that's going to be entered into by the city of Brantford as opposed to the utility then, if we determine that that's appropriate.
Yeah, and I think that would, it's something that I know that, whether there's, it doesn't have to be totally synchronized, but I think that there's some merit in having, something that's messaged and with some uniformity with the potential other people at the table. So whether it's Cambridge, North Dumfries, and so.
Now, we've used the word rebasing a number of times without a definition. You got folks watching today. Yeah. Could you give us like the 100-word Coles Notes of that definition, Paul?
100-word Coles Notes. It is the, I was going to say the recalibration. That's not good either. It is it's level setting the costs that the utility has to incur to service our area and take that business plan and go to the OEB and say, here's what I need, here's what we need to continue to provide Brantford with the service that we provide. The OEB evaluates that, and then based on that, they say, you are allowed to charge your customers this amount. And they can also say, you're not allowed. We think that, so that's the rebasing where you get your revenue line once every 5 years reset. And it's based on this 5-year plan.
So then once we recognize the economies of scale with respect to the blending of the companies, will we be going to the OEB rebasing, asking for a decline in our rates?
I can't speculate on what that would look like 10 years from now. I would think that would be, there obviously will be costs that the new utility,
Right.
the new company is going to have to deal with. And so I wouldn't want to promise that one.
Yeah. So when we're talking about holding the line for 10 years, what we're talking about is not going back to the OEB asking for an adjustment.
We would be, that's right, foregoing those one-time adjustments.
So
over
the
10 years.
corporation then would still be absorbing any increase in energy that we pay for to resell to our clients, right?
So we don't absorb any, we literally pass on that cost, Councillor McCreary, dollar for dollar.
Yeah.
Yes, so we would still have that role in the food chain of the energy
So
system.
our customers would still be absorbing that increase that we pass along because we are a flow through, right?
Exactly. Whatever happens, I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting that those costs will go up, but whatever happens to what I would call the commodity,
Right.
that price is a pass through.
Now there is fluctuation, right? That price has gone down, hasn't it?
So we're going through a circumstance right now where that pricing mechanism is changing between offering choices for whether it's time of use or whether,
Right.
and certainly during these COVID days that we've seen flat rates apply.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, yes, it does. But the reality is that it is, again, out of our control, and we are the biller, and we settle literally dollar for dollar.
So if the blended board at some point in time should decide that they wish to renege on this 10-year promise, that's perfectly okay for them to go ahead and do it?
I think that that's something that you would have in the shareholder agreement. And I think that, quite frankly, it would be, you'd have to, again, after you get through this MOU, one of the fundamentals is that there would be no harm and that there would be an element of this rate stability. But I think you'd have to, get that signed and sealed if you're concerned that would be something that people would renege on. I think they're generally, my experience is very good people to do business with.
Sure, but once the memorandum of understanding is signed, everybody becomes partners and represented by the same board. So
this is an interesting part, if I could interrupt you, Councilor McCreary, sorry. And I'm glad you're asking, you mentioned that. This does not trigger the formation of a new board. This does not trigger a new company. It literally is triggering a process that's going to allow you as a shareholder to dig deep on all these questions that you're asking here today and to get really into it and to and that's the juncture we're at right now. You will not wake up if you say I received this information and have a new board or a new company.
No, I think we all understand that, but we're at the first step of a process that's going to lead to a new company and a new board. Is that correct?
If it's successful and if you agree.
Yes. Yes, sorry, if it's successful, that's the clause I left out. So I think it's important as we go by each step to understand what the culmination will be if it's successful, right? Now, I've heard from a couple of constituents who are very concerned about the loss of local control. And I don't know that we have really sassified that concern. Could you speak to that, please, Paul? Mm-hmm. Loss of local control.
So I do think that you will notice that I've used a word that's specific in our presentation that talks about influence as opposed to control. And so you would retain local ownership. You would have a high degree of local influence, but that is, again, I think, a negotiated step as you move through this juncture of signing an MOU and then getting to a table to say, what does a shareholder agreement look like? And that's the part of this, one of the next steps. And that's when you, as a shareholder and your designates, would negotiate and make sure that your feelings are satisfied, that you have control over what's important to you. And you can have that in a shareholder agreement that makes it so that you don't get railroaded.
Thank you. Now, I believe somebody mentioned that maybe I heard incorrectly, but I thought somebody mentioned earlier that the value of the company currently is a lot of money. Can you speak to what you expect the current value of our company to be?
Yeah, so I mean, what the actual the value of the business, Councillor Carpenter threw out 170 million. I think that, there's obviously a competitive process that that you would do if you were in a divestiture, that would, you would see a dollar amount be driven by that commercial process. And so to give you a precise number, I can't right now, but I tell you that it is definitely, worth, after you deal with all your debt and all your other obligations, the baseline valuation of your utility is probably somewhere closer to that 110, 115. Now, what premiums are paid and how that whole element of divestiture goes is another thing.
Now, let me ask you the second half of that question. If you could look into the future, 5 years from the date on which we proceed with this merger, can you say whether or not the value of our shares will have increased, and by what guess number you might pick?
Honestly, Councillor McCreary, I think I spoke on the, anecdotally, I've heard from professionals that have been in the business for decades that have said they have not seen these things lose. I can't speculate on what a number would be. Okay. And I think you would probably be disappointed if I said, oh, absolutely, this will give you X, because there are things, but you're talking about a regulated business that people require, and that has an integral part in the communities it serves. And so I think the fundamentals of that business make it attractive, but I can't guarantee you anything.
Sure, that's not only responsible, Paul, but it's rather forward-looking, because if you gave us a number and didn't meet it, we'd be coming back to take it out of your hide at some point in the future, I suspect, right?
I've always got that little feeling in the back of my head.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All Councillor Sluss and Mayor Davis are up next.
Very good.
Thank you. Paul, when you say rate stabilization, really what you're talking about is what would be stabilized is 20% of the bill, and it would still be subject to inflationary increases, but the rebasing would be the only thing that would be stabilized. Is that correct?
You got it, Councillor Sluss. And so, that might sound like, well, that still sounds like regular increases, but I mean, there will be costs that new co will have to incur. And so you wouldn't want to, in the company that you would be a shareholder in, to say that we would have no recognition that costs do go up in life. So that inflationary increase, but it's this rate rebasing that creates this spikiness, this lumpiness in our sector that you have every 5 years, that you forego that.
Okay. My second question is for people watching, it's confusing enough when we deal with it every now and again. Most people don't deal with it at all. An identical house in Brantford with the same usage, would they have the same hydro bill as an identical house in Guelph?
In Guelph, Councillor Sluss, or were you thinking about?
Okay, take Peterborough, a comparable city.
I think that if you look at the overall distribution rates for many LDCs, including us, they're comparable. How they get, I mean, so I don't. There are very few outliers that have distribution rates that are, that stand out.
Okay, and then lastly, you indicated that next year is I forgot the term, the base adjustment. We would have to apply next year, correct?
It would be effective in January 2022. Yep.
Okay, that was my understanding, the way you presented it.
Yep.
And when I look at the timeline that you gave for a potential merger, it looked like that would happen in about January or February or March of 2022. Mm-hmm. So my question would be, if at the last moment this merger fell apart, we would not have submitted our rebasing application because we're now past the time that we thought, or we were past the time that we should have been submitting it, mm-hmm. on the assumption that we had a merger, but the merger didn't take place. So now you're sitting there with no application in to adjust your, how does that work?
Very good, Councillor Slash. And so I will say that we are living a dual lives right now, and that we are still planning and going through that work. And really, it's healthy work anyways, because you have to have a plan for your business, even if you merge or not. So we're going through that 5-year planning right now. And we are, certainly not, what we'd like to do is see this MOU be received and that you would move forward, and then you would, with in earnest, dig into this and give us an idea as soon as possible, whether you think it's got legs. We will continue to move forward with plans to rebase, and we wouldn't leave it, saying, oh, well, you know what, this is likely to move forward and we won't rebase. That would be unhealthy for the business that you own.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Davis.
Yes, thank you, Paul. The question of value, if you're talking about the value, and I assume as we go through the process, part of it, if we move forward, there'd be, kind of a valuation of what our Brantford Energy is worth. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so the value of a company, it's kind of like the value of a house. You can have a house that's worth $700,000, but when you have a $400,000 mortgage, it's really only $300,000 in your pocket when you sell it, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. It's similar.
You've got debtors to pay. That's right.
Yeah. And does the company have a lot of debt?
We have a debt ratio of, I think it's 57-43, if I'm not mistaken, Brian. And so that is really kind of, I think, just under what the allowable kind of ratio of debt to equity. So it's not an inordinate amount of debt for a utility.
I can just add that, Mayor Davis, that just in terms of numbers, our audited financial statements at the end of the year last year indicated a total debt of 49 million, slightly over 49 million.
So you mentioned the different, Energy Plus serves the county and our boundary lands, and obviously Cambridge and North Dumfries. So how do those two areas compare to one another in size? Like, for example, Cambridge and North Dumfries, and then the service area, which let's call it County of Brant and the City of Brantford.
So there is a larger rural element to the to Energy
number of
Plus,
customers, right? And whatnot.
Oh, number of customers. So it's about 60,000 customers. I've got a couple of stats here that I can share with you here. But you're looking at essentially, roughly 61,000 to our 40, I think is the number, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. But you got to include what's in the county though, right?
And that would include, you're probably looking at the NUCO at the end of it would be, I think it's around 64,000 for Energy Plus in total in our 41.
Now there is a strip between Cambridge and the county that's serviced by another hydro company. Is that correct?
Well, Hydro One does have a presence in and around that area, yes.
Yeah, which would be what was the old North Dumfries or South Dumfries.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned that there would be two bases of operation, and so where would they likely be?
So you would be having obviously we would be at 150 Savannah Oaks, and we would be, and then there's a northern operations center that would be, it's up in Cambridge, not quite at the 401, but it would be somewhere in the area of where Highway 24 and Bishops Road is where their current location is.
And
so, but the operations center specifically, I think it's very specific in the MOU, and that you'll go through that they would be looking at. That's an aspiration that we would have operations emanating from both of those areas.
Right. Okay. And you mentioned one advantage is better service to customers, more innovative service. Like, why would that be better with going into partnership with North Dumfries and Cambridge as opposed to just continuing by ourselves?
So I think it really comes back to continuing to provide excellent service. Like we do, our employees do a great job. And I'm proud to be associated with all of them. But I do think that there are elements of our the use of technology that we could leverage, and we would invest in, quite frankly, even if the merger doesn't happen. But we do need to look at systems that I know that Energy Plus has currently, that in terms of whether it be control rooms or whether it be outage management. I think that the idea of the potential for a future transformer station is something that we might have a joint interest in regardless. So there is things that I think making the system more robust and having the technology and that's really just the table stakes of distribution. And then you take that into another level and you go, there's things changing inside of the space, whether it be distributed energy or storage, or whether it be electric vehicles, the electrification of our society. That will also bring with it lots of change and opportunities for the utility, and that you will not want to be as a community, I don't think, on a priority list. You'll want to be your own priority, and that you would have, I think, more bandwidth to serve customers with those new ideas. So, and then if that's not enough, I think just bringing people together in terms of just being able to respond to the things that happen in life, having a joined up operations group that is on the same, on the same team, also has some attraction servicing, whether it be Brantford or the surrounding area. So I think customers have a lot of opportunity to see benefits there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Paul, I think we'll see other questions being raised. I think we should call for the motion recommendation here. I can have a motion to approve that. Maybe Councillor Utley.
Mayor Davis?
Davis, thank you. And a seconder? Any hands anywhere? Need a seconder for this motion.
Councillor Sless?
One more time for a seconder for this motion, please.
Councillor Sless seconded it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Didn't hear that, Paul. All right, if there's any, I'll call for the vote. If there's anybody in opposition, please let us know. Otherwise, silence will be considered.
Councillor Carpenter in opposition?
Okay. Did you see that hand go up? I didn't see the hand go up, so I can't tell.
Councillor Carpenter was in opposition.
Okay, so we recorded that the vote carried, but with Councillor Carpenter in opposition.
All right.
All right. That we'll move to adjournment. If there's no objection.
Could I jump in, guys? Could we know who was on the side supporting the resolution, please?
Okay, some sort of record. So let's.
Well, it's the group. It's the listing here of the attendees. So Mayor Davis, Councillor Martin, Councillor McCurry, Councillor Sless, Councillor Utley, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Wall, and those opposing were Councillor Carpenter. Have I missed anybody, Paul?
I think you've got it. And if anybody can identify anything else, otherwise, let's speak your piece or we'll move on. All righty. Thank you.
All right. We'll call it adjourned. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
So, Paul, as I understand it, we're signing off.
That is correct. And we will leave it to Chris and the council.
All right. Thank you, folks. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much. Take care.
Thank you, Scott. So to my fellow councillors, we're going to reconvene now. We're moving from meeting as a shareholding group to actually having a city council meeting to consider the resolution that the shareholder sent up to us. So I'm now going to call to order the City of Brantford Special City Council meeting. And Deputy Clerk, if you please call the roll.
Councillor Martin,
Here.
Councillor Weaver,
Present.
Councillor Utley,
Here.
Councillor McCreary,
Here.
Councillor Sless,
Here.
Councillor Wall,
Present.
Councillor Carpenter,
Here.
and Mayor Davis.
Present. Thank you. Because we're meeting virtually, of course, we have procedural rules, which we've stated many times, but the procedural rules require I restate them every time. So all members, please remain muted for the meeting. During the meeting, reduce feedback. All web cameras should remain turned on so that you continue to count for quorum. Staff are requested to join the meeting as and when needed. And any member should indicate they wish to speak by pushing that raised hand button in the participants box, which I will look at. In the event that we have an interruption, a connection interruption, we'll recess for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If we can't do it within 15 minutes, then we're adjourned. And we'll be voting using eScribe. Just want to make sure I'm into it myself. And members of the public who register as delegates are able to take part electronically via webcam or via telephone for meetings. All rules for delegations and the city's procedural bylaw should apply. So does anybody have a conflict of interest? Not seeing any. So move to item 4. We don't have any delegations on today's agenda. We have item 4, the Brantford Energy Corporation shareholders report. And I'd ask the Deputy Clerk, could you please display the report the City Council's received from the shareholders of the Brantford Energy Corporation? There you have it. So if I can have a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor. Moved by Councillor Weaver, second by Councillor Utley. And Councillor McCreary, I believe you might have an amendment.
I believe you're correct, Mayor, but I'm not entirely certain what it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me just check my email. I didn't have it earlier. My apologies, Mayor. I do not have the wording in front of me. I believe it's to create a committee. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's an amendment suggested that that a Brantford Energy Task Force be established, and that the mandate of the Brantford Energy Task Force include the following: 1, reviewing and making recommendations to City Council regarding a memorandum of understanding with regards to the exploration of a merger with the Brantford Energy Corporation, Energy Plus. B, the business case for the potential merger. C, a shareholder agreement. D, a merger participation agreement. E, a promissory note. F, any other documents or analysis related to the potential merger of Brantford Energy Corporation Energy. 2, that the task force be comprised of Councillors Utley, Councillor Martin, Councillor McCreary, and myself. 3, that the Brantford Energy Task Force report directly to City Council, and that the legal department provide administrative support and the clerk's department provide meeting support. So that's the amendment. So,
Mayor, thank you. I couldn't have said it any better myself, and I believe the seconder is going to be Councillor Martin.
is that correct, Councillor Martin?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So any discussion on the amendment? Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Through you, I guess I'm seeking maybe a friendly amendment to the amendment to add something in there regarding consulting with the public or getting feedback from members of the public. Maybe a D, to work with communications to, use social media, whatever. Get public feedback regarding it.
Yeah, I'd say this. So the memorandum of understanding is not an agreement. It just sets out the general parameters. And I believe, if I recall correctly, what I was told is that The task force, the first duty of the task force would be to report back to council on the memorandum of understanding, whether we should consider signing it. And then once that's signed, they'd begin a process, and part of that process would include, a public consultation process as to whether, the city should proceed to enter into the actual merger agreement. So
if I think what you said was that public consultation would be a part of it after this.
yeah, I mean, absolutely, because if we're not going to sign the memorandum of understanding, then like there's really nothing to discuss, right?
Nope, that's fair. Just a misunderstanding on my part, maybe. Thank you.
So any other discussion on the amendment? Not seeing any, I call the vote on the amendment.
The amendment to item 4 carries on a recorded vote of 7-1. Members of council voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Wall, Martin, Sless, Mayor Davis. Those opposed, Councillor Carpenter.
Okay, so any discussion on the resolution as amended? Yes, Councillor Wall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Davis. So I get this. I really do. I think I understand it, and I think I know where we're trying to get with this. I just think, for anybody who decides to go into the archives and watch this video, this is a pretty big decision for our corporation and for the city and for how we're going to service our, our constituents and the clients of Brantford Power. And I'm willing to support this now because I really think that we owe it to the people we represent to at least investigate it and see if this is something that's the right thing to do. But I am looking forward to the process, just providing more clarity. In my role here as councillor today, like, it is my expectation to understand the decisions that I'm making, but I really want to be able to feel utterly confident and comfortable being able to explain to my constituents what this actually means. And it is a big, very complicated moving machine. And I hope that this process will just make the world a better place in some capacity for the people we represent. So I'm willing to support it now because I want to investigate it, but that is not necessarily an endorsement of support for what we're doing.
Fair enough, Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you very much. It's my recollection that we're following the same course of action that we followed when we entered into discussions with the County of Brant relating to the annexed lands that we now govern. The process is pretty clear. We take this discussion to a point where we produce a document which can then be considered in its final form by all members of council of the affected communities. Once that is done, we'll go to the public and we'll get the public's solicitation. We'll provide proper public consultation, unlike what we've done in some issues that have come before this council in the midpoint of its term. And we'll hear from them, and we'll then formulate a discussion around that, and we'll make a decision as a council and a community whether or not we want to enter a partnership with these other folks to the north of us, or whether we wish to continue as we are doing now. And I wouldn't pass judgment at this point on which is the proper course of action. And that's why I agreed with the mayor that I would sit on this committee as a member who has maybe a set of eyes that's different from the other folks on the committee. And I would appreciate the input of all members of council as this committee goes forward and deals with this issue before us. And I want to again highlight Councillor Wall's comment that we really need to consider what folks in the community want, but that has to be based upon proper information provided by the corporation of the city of Brantford that outlines for people exactly what the truth is on this issue and what both sides look like. And again, I'll say, unlike some issues that have been before us in the half of this term. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Sless.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just for people watching, again, it probably sounds very confusing and very convoluted. What this committee will do, what we're voting on tonight, is to simply take a deeper look at what's being proposed. And out of that, something will come back to council with a recommendation. And at that point, we'll start to make actual decisions. But at this point, we're simply looking to see if there's something we even have a stomach to do. So nobody's doing anything right now other than looking and exploring.
Councillor Weaver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm going to be happy to support this. This is actually the easy decision. The much tougher decision is after we have all the facts and after the reports have come forward to council and we make our final decision. That's going to be the tough decision. I'm leaning towards moving forward with this simply because I've always been concerned about, as a city, we own a power company. And I'm concerned about what the power companies in Ontario call disruptive technologies. I do foresee in the future, within 10 years, that you'll probably be able to go to Costco, in Brantford, by the way, and get solar for your house or a wind turbine or something. I really suspect that technology is going to get to a point where it's very inexpensive and people are going to start adopting that, which is going to have a negative effect on the power company. So having a merger of this sort with a larger group, that disruption will be less for each of the municipalities. So I'm going to be very interested to see the asset review of the other two groups as well. I think that'll tell the tale of whether or not we should move forward. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Councillor Carpenter?
Well, that's a great segue. Thank you, Councillor Weaver. So I agree the same thing will happen, that there be less need for electricity. And don't forget that it's a distribution company. It doesn't produce the product, it delivers it. And it pays for delivery charges added onto your bill. And so the question that concerns me is, we don't own the gas company. And why don't we own the gas company? Well, because the private sector owns the gas company. I don't have a problem with my gas bill. I never have. That's been quite decent, quite frankly. And it's a regulated business, just like this would be. So my concern is, we're only asking for what an MOU of a merger would look like. And I want the information about what's the asset value. Why would we own something that could be depleting in value as technology moves forward and less people move off the grid and become self-sufficient in electricity? That makes the entity worth less, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. So that's my concern. So going forward, I think we should be considering the opportunity of selling the asset and letting the taxpayers reap the benefit of the asset by our infrastructure being rebuilt, affordable housing that we all talk about that we need being done, and the other things. I don't think we should be necessary. We should be considering, is it our responsibility as a municipality, as a government, to own a business? And if the businesses are being provided by a private enterprise around the province, maybe they should be providing the entity. We don't have to look forward to finding ourselves on boards of directors when the real position should be, what's the best move for the taxpayer? So that's why that's the concerns I have, and I think I've expressed them to everybody before. Like Councillor Wall, I have interpretation about moving forward with an MOU that only considers a merger and not an actual sale. Thank you.
Councillor Martin?
Thank you. And I'll address something that Councillor Carpenter brought up. When we were asking questions of the director of Brantford Power, one of the things I said is this company worth more on the market when we want to sell it if we merge with the other entities first? And he didn't really nail it down, but I kind of got the impression that it is worth more on the market as a larger entity. And I think our value increases if we go forward with the merger. But as to the merger, the devil's in the details. And until we get a deep dive into the numbers for both companies and look at what we're going to end up with as our percentage shareholders, then we'll be able to determine then whether it's a good deal for our community or not. And that's the decision, as was indicated earlier, that's going to be the tough one, is making that decision as to whether it's a good deal or not. And I hope that the committee is able to put together enough information to help members of council come to the correct decision once we have all that information. And that's what I'm looking forward to. Thank you.
Mr. Hutchings, I see your hand raised. Did you want to
Yes.
respond to required?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor. I just, Brian Hutchings, CEO, I just wanted to just jump in here because there's been a number of comments made about process and MOU and those sorts of things. I just want to be very clear with everybody with this committee, and you've already mentioned this, Mr. Mayor, but I want to reiterate it. First thing this committee will do is the first thing on the list is review the MOU, and it'll bring that back to council. All the other things that are listed requirements do, if this council does not approve the MOU, we will not be doing the other things. And I just want to, we won't be further investigating because the MOU is the first step. That will come back to council for approval on the MOU. I just want to make it clear on the other side, in a parallel universe in Cambridge and North Dumfries, they're following a very similar process. They've set up a subcommittee of both their councils, of 5 people of their councils. They're meeting November 3rd. They've had their first joint council meeting of 16 people to appoint this committee. And they're meeting November 3rd to look at the MOU as well and to agree on the MOU and process that. And then they subsequently will go to the next level if we all agree on the MOU around that early November time period. So I want to make it very clear to everybody, the first step is the MOU. We'll bring that back to council for approval. And then after that, if we do approve the MOU, we'll go to different levels of detail and bring those analyses back to council as we go through them to many of your questions at that point in time. But this is just the first step. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I certainly support the moving forward with the MOU and look forward to the results with not only our community, but with the other 2 communities involved as well. There's a lot of moving beyond the MOU if we get that far. It would add value to an asset that already gives the city a dividend every year consistently. And from what I've seen, a merger would increase that dividend fairly significantly. And it's an asset that keeps on giving. If we sell an asset, that's it, it's done. We spend the money and we've got no dividend coming in from that point on. There's pros and cons to both, but I certainly look at the long-term goal with raising money for our community. I think we still have a seat at the table, and we still have some control, not full control, but we still have a significant control and ownership of that new co. So I'll be supporting yes for the MOU, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Utley. Certainly, I'll be voting in favor of this. I think it's been made clear, it's been said several times that by this resolution, what we're really doing is setting up the committee in the process to check this out further, to make sure to look at whether or not it really is going to be a benefit to our community, and that the process has a lot of steps to it where it'll be, let's say, exhaustively reviewed with public input as well. But the memorandum of understanding is very clear that it's not a deal. What it says, I believe it says that what you want to do, the 3 municipalities, is look at further whether or not it's a merger that we want to enter into. And the memorandum of understanding sets up the parameters like rate stabilization being important, service to customers. And we'll see that memorandum of understanding when it comes back to us. So the first step is the task force taking a look at that memorandum of understanding that the boards, the 2 hydro boards, Cambridge and North Dumfries and our Brantford Energy have approved for us to look at. So that'll be the first order of business. The task force will be looking at it. We'll then come back to council with a recommendation whether we should consider signing the memorandum of understanding. And once the memorandum of understanding is signed, that then begins that whole process of looking at the fine details and the material and the accounting evidence and the legal evidence to see whether or not it truly is of benefit to our community. So the boards have told us, the hydro boards that know the business as well, that they think this is worth pursuing and looking at. And I think it's certainly worth that, and we'll see what comes out of it. But it's going to be, as you said, Councillor Utley, an involved process with lots of steps, lots of approvals, and potentially of real benefit to our community. And I don't hold the same view of the energy market that it's going to peter out. I think actually, as we move to electrification of cars and homes, the need for huge volumes of hydro, 220 volt hydro, is just going to increase, which, very difficult to supply that through solar panels. And very likely it could be a very much expanded market where you really want to have some local control and input as to, there's an advantage to that, a benefit to that, where you have some local control and input into how that's provided and the way in which it's provided. So certainly worth looking at, and this is a way of us to do that. So I'm going to vote in favor as well. Any other comment? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Mr. Deputy Clerk.
The main motion as amended carries on a recorded vote of 7-1. Members of council voting in favor as follows. Councillors Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Wall, Martin, Sless, Mayor Davis. Those opposed, Councillor Carpenter.
All right, so if we could then move to our standard bylaw, which of course we do at the end of every council meeting, to confirm the proceedings of this particular meeting. And do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Weaver, I believe you might have that.
Yes, I am seeking a seconder for bylaws, first and second reading. Thank you, Councillor Utley. That leave be given to the mover and seconder to introduce the following bylaws for the first and second reading. Bylaw 170-2020, bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of Corporation of the City of Brantford with respect to the special meeting held today on October 21st, 2020.
All right. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, Deputy Clerk, call the vote, please.
The first reading of bylaw 170-2020 carries on a recorded vote of 7-1. Members of council voting in favor are as follows. Councillors Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Wall, Martin, Sless, Mayor Davis. Those opposed, Councillor Carpenter.
All right, we'll move to third reading. Councillor Wall, could you please read the resolution, the third and final reading of the bylaw?
My apologies, Mayor Davis. I don't appear to have it. Is it?
Yeah, it's bylaw 170-2020, be taken as read a third time, be finally, there it is right there.
So moved. Thank you, Mayor Davis.
All right.
Seeking a seconder. Councillor Weaver.
Weaver, any discussion? Box. Seeing none. Clerk, could you please take the vote on that?
The third reading of bylaw 170-2020 carries on recorded vote of 7-1. Members of council voting in favor are as follows. Councillors Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Wall, Martin, Sless, Mayor Davis. Those opposed, Councillor Carpenter.
Great. So that completes the item of business for tonight, and the meeting is now adjourned.